Let's cannonball right into the pool with these 10 questions about pools in Central Florida. Tom, why are pools such a big deal in Central Florida?
Well, Gabriel, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's hot. Really, really hot and humid. And getting in a pool is one of the nicest things you can do in Central Florida.
I would agree. I would definitely agree. Now, for you that do not know, and why would you? Tom actually has a pool at his house,
I
so
do.
you are well versed with the cost of pools and the benefits and the not benefits of having a pool, the pros and the cons. How much value does a pool really add to a home in Central Florida?
That's a question that depends on where you're buying and what price level you're buying your home. In a lot of neighborhoods, a pool is more or less expected, right? So it's not that it adds value, but by not having one, you have less value.
Detracts the value.
In your really high-end neighborhoods, like your $1 million and up kind of neighborhoods, they're pretty much expected, but they can range anywhere from a $50,000 addition to a $300,000 addition. I've seen some pools that are just absolutely crazy with fire pits in the middle of the pool and lounge seating in the middle of the pool with the fire pit. It's insane some of the things that people do. So outside of those, your pretty standard pool in a resale property is going to add anywhere between maybe $10,000 and $25,000 in resale value. The cost of building the pool is quite a bit more than that.
And that is my next question. What is the average cost of building a pool?
Well, I've only built one pool, and
Okay.
I built it back in 2003, and the cost then was about $30,000. That same, and it was not a fancy pool. It was a nice pool, but not a fancy pool. That same pool today would be closer to 50.
Okay.
Now that's a pool with the cage, with the screen enclosure. Without the screen enclosure is almost as much as a pool, the actual pool build. So if you don't do the screen enclosure, then it does cost less, but you also get to use the pool less, in my opinion, because you have to deal with all the bugs and critters, and also adds to your maintenance costs.
I was going to say, in Florida, when I was growing up, we did have a pool. We built the screen enclosure because the pine trees that we have, all the pine needles would go in the pool, and it actually broke our filter.
Yeah.
Because it was pulling straight through, and it ended up costing my parents as much as it would have been to put in a screen enclosure just to refix the pump. So,
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So speaking of maintenance, what is the average cost of maintenance of running a pool? And can you go a little bit into the difference between chlorine and saltwater?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. On average, I'd say you're going to spend somewhere between maybe $30 and $50 a month on chemicals. Perhaps with a salt system, you might spend a little bit less. The salt inside the water actually goes through a special process that converts it into chlorine, and then as it evaporates, it converts back to salt, which is a really interesting process. So as long as you don't have a lot of water loss or have to add a lot of fresh water in, the salt remains there and it just converts back and forth from chlorine to salt. It's a really interesting electrical chemical process that I don't completely understand, but I understand the impact is it saves me a lot of money. However, I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize is, you have your weekly costs, you have your monthly costs and things like that. Where a pool really costs you money is in the long term. A pool pump is $1,000, $1,200, $1,500. A heater for if you have a spa, if you have a propane heater, they're $4,000, $4,500. Wow. Right? They're super expensive. Even if you buy it and install it yourself, they're like $3,000.
Yeah.
So if you have a pool heater, which you don't really need in Florida, but if you have a spa, you really do want one. So those are kind of expensive. Every 10 to 15, maybe as far as 20 years out, you're gonna have to resurface the pool. That can cost you 8, 10, 12 grand, depending on how much it is. I just had a leak in my pool. We had apparently probably during a cold spell, I suspect, one of the pipes underground cracked, and there was a leak, and water kept going away, and we kept filling it back up, and having to do that for a while. And then we had a guy come out, and they took a long time to find it because it was underneath the cement. It cost me about $1,700 to get it found and fixed. On top of, I spent a lot more money on chemicals for those couple of months while we were doing all that, because I kept having to add new water in. You always have to rebalance all the chemicals in there every time you add new water in, because it screws up the balance. So those kind of things can be expensive. And then like if you have an automation system, which is great because you don't have to think about the pool as much. But they're $5,000-$6,000, and then so if that goes out, they're expensive again.
It's like buying another car.
Yeah,
it's always having that thing that you have to maintain and put into.
Yeah, I mean the only difference between a boat and a pool is where the water is.
Yeah, there we go. And sometimes the boats do have water in the pool, so who knows? Okay, so is it better to buy a home with a pool or add one later, do you think?
My opinion, it's absolutely better to buy a home with a pool. Simply because you're going to, as I said, your pool adds maybe $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 of value. Building that pool is going to cost you $50,000 or more, right?
Yeah.
So you're almost 100% better off financially, right? Building or having a pool already built. Now, you want to make sure it's not decrepit and about to need resurfacing and all new pool equipment, because you can spend 20 grand doing that right after you buy the house. So you want to make sure it's up to date at least, and you've got some reasonable lifespan left in the pool, which is why it's really important when you buy a house with a pool to not just get the house inspected, but actually have the pool itself inspected. And I would say even further than just having your general inspector who can inspect the pool, have a pool company come out and look at it.
Mm-hmm.
You take those two opinions, right? So don't take one opinion or the other, take both and put them together and kind of figure out what's going on in the pool.
Makes sense. A lot of the time it's so, to be clear, inspections are fully based on what is at surface value.
Absolutely.
So there could be something severely wrong with that beautiful pool.
Absolutely.
That you have no idea about, and it could cost you more than building that pool in general in the long run with insurance and all those things. Sure. But we have insurance later in this list, and we'll get to that. Before we keep going, if you're finding this information helpful, please make sure to drop a like, hit subscribe, let us know if you have any questions in the comments, and of course, hit that notification bell. We drop videos every single Sunday, so make sure to stay informed and join us every Sunday.
Awesome.
Back to the questions. What should a buyer look out for in older pool systems?
In older pool systems. So again, obviously you're going to get it inspected, but when you're out there looking, look at the pool deck. See if there's surface cracks. Sometimes they've been covered up. Sometimes you can see where there was a crack and somebody filled in maybe with some caulk or some other substance and then painted the pool deck, which is perfectly okay, but you just want to see that. Tiny cracks, you're always going to have those in a cement surface. But big cracks or where they're unlevel, you got to be really careful of that, because now you've got some settling going on. Probably the worst thing that can happen with a pool is you have a real separation of the pool itself from the pool deck. And when that starts to happen, you can really come into a place where you might actually not only have to build a new pool, but you have to pay to have the current pool demoed, which can cost you $15,000 or $20,000 just for that.
Yeah.
Then you come back and build another pool in there. So you want to make sure that you don't buy one where there's severe deterioration of the pool. Avoid buying a house with a green pool. If the water's green and you can't see the bottom and see clearly, you need to have that corrected before you buy. You need to be able to get to the bottom of the pool, see what's going on to make sure you're not buying something with giant problems.
So are there financing options when you're buying a pool? Like, are there certain financing options for like putting a pool in? I know that there's renovation model or renovation loans. Is there anything similar to that with pools?
Yeah. So I mentioned the one pool that I built. That was on a new construction home. And so it was interesting. This was in 2003, as I mentioned, before a lot of things changed. So at that time, there were mortgage companies that would do what they called a pool holdback. So they would set the mortgage up with the pool and the cost of the pool in the mortgage, but you wouldn't have to start the pool until you closed on the new construction. It saved you a lot of money because the pool company would charge a certain amount of money for the pool, and then the builder would just tack money on top. Well, this pulled that out of the equation, right? Because you weren't having the builder build the pool, you're having the pool company come in afterwards.
You're cutting the middleman out of
right. but you also got to have you had to finish the house first, and you got the same mortgage. That can no longer happen. So, but there are options to finance a pool, basically through like a home equity line or a renovation loan, perhaps. I haven't gotten clarification on whether a renovation loan can be used for that. But certainly you could do a home equity line, a home equity loan, which are different products, right? Or I'm sure there's financing from the pool companies themselves, but you're going to pay a significantly higher rate, probably in the 9, 10, 12% kind of range versus getting something where it's a lien on the home.
Okay. Okay. So next question, what's the difference in resale value between homes with a private pool, so a pool that you would have on your home premises, or a community pool, which can definitely be a benefit if you don't want to deal with the upkeep?
Yeah, it's community pools I find really interesting because a lot of places sell their homes, right? Especially when you're looking at new construction and those kind of things, as these are the amenities. And I go into a lot of those communities and I see them all the time. And I'll tell you that it's rare to see those pools full of people. They're often empty. And so while they're nice and they seem to add a lot theoretically, in practice, I don't see them adding as much value. And you certainly have a higher HOA because somebody's paying for that pool. And guess who it is? Everybody, right? So if you're going to use the community pool, if you're that family or that couple, whatever, that's going to go down there and use that pool, great, right? But be honest to yourself, because if you don't like to do that, or that's not, it's almost a day trip, right? So we've got to pack stuff up, put it in a wagon, go over there, right? If that's not how you're going to live your life, then don't value that. Value the private pool or no pool. You can always, I'd prefer, honestly, to go to the beach versus a community pool.
And not just that, we have so many amazing hotels in our area that also allow you to go in, whether you're just making a dining reservation or, you don't have to be staying at the hotel. At some of the hotels, I highly recommend, if you want to check out our Florida Sunshine State Handbook. We have some great recommendations in there of restaurants, and some of them are in hotels, different theme park location areas, and they have the best pools in the state. And you can use them completely free when you pay $10 in parking.
You know what? That might be a good upcoming podcast for us. Pools you can use for free.
Pools you can use for free. Pool hopping around the resorts in the area. So now let's get to the, in my opinion, juiciest question that people don't typically think about. But do they help or hurt your insurance cost?
Oh, yeah, goodness. No, they absolutely cost money, right? So you could have, you certainly have more opportunity for spills, people getting hurt, right? People falling, people hitting their head on the bottom of the pool and those kind of things, which is, horrible. Obviously drownings, those are all concerns. And to mitigate those, there's some laws based on when the pool was built, right? About what safety features have to be in place, and all of those safety features cost money, right? So it's going to cost you a little bit more to keep it up and have the safety around it, which you want to have, right? And then your insurance is going to be higher because they're going to factor that additional liability in. I mean, think about even outside of the liability of people getting hurt. I mentioned how expensive a pool cage is, right? Well, when a hurricane comes through and that pool cage gets wiped out, the insurance company has to write a big check to replace it. And the house might be perfectly fine, but the pool screen might have gotten destroyed. So, there definitely is a lot more risk in it. But again, it's all about lifestyle, right? I mean, a pool is probably one of the worst financial decisions you can make in your life. However, not everything is about finances. A lot of things are about enjoying where you live and your lifestyle. And like I said, in 2001, when we moved here, I got a pool. And I vowed to never not have a pool again. Now, being frank, at the end of my kids aren't, I've got one kid at home right now. She's about to be gone. We don't use our pool enough. It doesn't make sense. So my next house will not have a pool. I won't ever have one again.
There we go.
I don't think.
Never say never. Never say never. I'm going to go over now and go swimming. So we kind of answered the next question. Can a pool hurt your home's value if it's not well maintained? So I think this one's more, we try to answer a question, at least one question for a buyer, a seller, and an investor. So this one I think is for the sellers in the room, and the investors as well. What would you recommend when selling a home to keep maintained, to keep that value up?
Sure. When you're going to sell home, assuming you're not selling your home in a distressed situation, like you're proactively doing it because of a good reason, then go ahead and have a pool inspector come out and check the pool out. Have your pool company or a pool company come out and do a solid cleaning and make sure everything's aligned and greased and all the different things are up to speed. Because when that buyer has the pool inspected, which they should, right? When they have that and it says good to go, check, then that clears a huge financial implication. If anything is wrong with the pool, buyers immediately say, well, I don't know how much that's going to cost, so I assume it's going to cost a ton. And the leaky seal is $1,000. No, it's $3 worth of lubricant around the seal. Not a big deal, So have it prepped, checked, cleaned. Pay somebody to come weekly, so that you don't have any algae on the bottom, because you're not paying attention anymore as much because you're getting ready to move or whatever. So make sure it's highly maintained and completely up to speed.
I think that's a great tip with the whole house in general as well. Just
it always is.
Keep it clean, even though you don't think you need to mop those floors anymore because Aunt Helen's not coming over. You still should mop. Someone's Aunt Helen's coming over. And our last question, are there some underrated pool alternatives that will help with a resale if you don't have a pool, or if you're looking to buy a house that doesn't have a pool, but you still want that kind of lifestyle, but you want to find a compromise?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple of things that people do. I've seen a lot of, even with an enclosure, like a pool enclosure, but it's just a really big patio. And maybe they have a nice outdoor kitchen with outdoor dining and a pergola. Maybe they have a spa. Spas are great, right? You can use a spa year round. You get wet. It's so you can go in and cool off if it's summertime, or you can use it as a hot tub, and relax your aching joints, right? So those are kind of cool. Not as friendly for kids, I've seen people with splash pads. You've seen those big commercial splash pads, out in the parks and those kind of things. I've seen people with personal splash pads for their kids, So it's not quite as expensive as a pool, but it gives you some of those same kind of things.
Same kind of things, and definitely less insurance.
Definitely less issues
when
with
you
insurance.
have an above ground pool that's not a built in the ground pool.
Correct.
Kind of things too. Well, this has been a lot of great information. Once again, please hit that like button and subscribe if you found this helpful, and hit that notification bell to get notified when we make videos for you. I've been Gabriel Burgos, and I'm about to go swimming.
And I am always Tom McNamara, and I'm not.
And we'll see you next time.